Spoiler alert, you do not put a ball joint boot on with a hammer. Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears, the house of broken dreams and broken cars. So if you've been following my Miata project, we left off making some repairs to the steering. We fixed a leak. It was in the banjo bolts with the seals. We also replaced the power steering pump itself. Now, overall, this project has been really making huge progress, except it's limited by some pretty major expenses. And that is because while this car does run and drive, it passes smog, it actually drives really well, except for the fact that the suspension is actively trying to kill me. The shocks and springs on this car are completely worn out. The shocks have probably been blown for years. The springs are bouncy. Every time I hit a bump, it tries to catapult me out the car. It's really bad. This car handles terribly, and that is an expensive project. And today, we're going to start fixing that. I have behind me an entire suspension bushings kit, as well as all new ball joints. This is the first stage of my suspension renovation project on this Miata. We're going to get this put together, and by the time I'm done with this, I'm probably going to end up ordering shocks and springs, just trying to figure out in my head what I want to do with this car. Do I want it to go all out with like a Fox Racing suspension type of thing, or do I want to do like a teen setup? I'm not entirely sure. Or do I want to just put stock shocks and springs? The answer to that is probably no. We also have some work to do on the rear end. We'll probably get to that after we do suspension. But this project, this particular phase of the project is going to be a unique challenge for me. I'm giving myself 1 week to do this. Now, today, this is Sunday. This is the only full day that I have to work on this car. The rest of the week is going to be during my off time, work a full-time job, so I can't come out here and wrench on this car. For more than a few minutes at a time. I can take a break, do a couple of things, go back in, but that's really not good for making real progress on this. So I got to hustle on this thing because I have a really exciting project coming into my garage next week, and I really want to get this out of the way first, because what I have coming up for you guys next week is going to be really exciting. It's going to be seriously cool and a really interesting story, so stay tuned for that. It'll be worth it. So let's take a look at the stuff that I have ready for this car, and we'll talk about how to get started. So here I have a complete set of Moog ball joints for this car. I really like Moog. I have them on my Prelude, my Maverick, as well as any other car I've done. Really good product. I've never had any problems with them. Here I have a complete set of energy suspension bushings. These are polyurethane bushings made in America. Now, I don't know if that means in the United States of America. It could be made in North America. It could be made in South America. That kind of narrows it down to, a quarter of the planet right here. But it's made in, somewhere in America, north or south. Let's open this up here. And that is a lot of bushings. That is a surprising amount of bushings. This car has a lot of bushings. Oh my, what have I got myself into? Anyway, these bushings, they each come with their own kind of instruction sets. They're pretty well labeled. This one says front sway bar set, rear stab bar bushing, 1990 to 97 Miata. That's real helpful. I'm assuming this will be pretty obvious though, since they're massive, massive bushings. This is probably the full set of control arm bushings for one side, and this is probably a full set of control arm bushings for the other side. The good news is they each come with their own installation kits. I assume Energy Suspension sells each of these separately, so they have, like, you know, instructions on this set, instructions on that set. So they'll tell me where they all go. We're just gonna take it as it comes. All right. So first thing is we have to get the car off the ground, get it on some jack stands, and take the wheels off. And then I think we need to take the shocks and springs out. They're a coilover spring setup. They're not coilovers, but that's technically still coilover spring is still coilover. So we got to take that out, and we can start pulling out, separating ball joints, and removing control arms. So we're going to start on the front. I don't want to even look at the rear until the front is done. Welcome to the wasteland. I've got the upper and lower control arm for the driver's side of the Miata on the back of my TR7 here. I've got them cleaned up. That's why I brought them out here. I just kind of hit them with a wire brush and some brake cleaner, carb cleaner, and it's not too bad. I noticed there's just a little bit of surface rust here and there, so I'm going to go ahead and spray these with some rust neutralizer, and then I'm going to spray them with some rubberized undercoating so that they'll be nice and protected for years to come. I'm going to do that before I press out the original, looks like original bushings here, because I don't want to get any paint inside the bushing sleeves here, because that will make the new bushings not fit. You see over here in the upper ball joint, it's nice and cracked open. There's still some grease in there, so I guess it could have been a lot worse. But yeah, this is ready to go, that's for sure. Back in the garage, you see I have all these tools on the floor, various nuts and bolts. The original lower ball joint, this one wasn't too bad. I kind of suspect that this was replaced at some point because the bushing wasn't torn until I hit it with the pickle fork. It was a little cracked, but it wasn't ripped apart. Over here, you see my brake caliper is hanging with some baling wire, and I've got the sway bar dropped, but I have not taken off any of the old bushings. Got the tie rod removed. I never tightened this down. Heck, I didn't even tighten down my lug nuts, and it turns out I lost one. So I need a new set of lug nuts anyway. The steering knuckle over there, I don't think the hub is bad, so I'm not going to replace it right now. I'm tempted to, but I suppose, I don't know, maybe I'll look up some videos and see if it's worth doing. In here, everything is kind of looking okay aside from that. The original shock and spring, definitely not going back in, and I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to take the shocks and springs down to the shop and have them separate it. They'll do it for a couple of bucks. I just don't want, the loaded missile on my hands. I hate springs. So let's get right back to work. I'm going to go back outside, finish up the control arms, and then start pressing the old bushings out. Well, I made quite a bit of progress today. I'm certainly not unhappy. Down here we have everything out, and we have the old bushings pressed out of the hardware and the new bushings pressed in. The new ball joint is in, but I still have not put the dust cover on. I'm going to do that once I get the control arm hung on the car. This all went pretty well. I sprayed some rust neutralizer on a little bit of the surface rust after I cleaned it, and then sprayed some rubberized undercoating just so that it stays protected for a good long time. over here, let's take a look. So the passenger side lower control arm is actually out in the wasteland on the Triumph because I am waiting for the paint to dry. This is the upper control arm, and I made quite an interesting discovery. You see this here? That's bent. This is the upper control arm, and I'm not entirely sure how this could have happened, but I have an idea. While I was painting the lower control arm, I noticed there was a marking on it indicating that it was a left lower control arm. And there's only one reason it would be like that, and it was handwritten, not like stamped or anything. And the only thing I can think of is that maybe it's a junkyard part. And also, when I was removing the lower control arm, I had a little bit of difficulty getting it out of that bracket there. And I think that's because this subframe might be slightly warped, probably from the damage to the other side. Or I'm also thinking it's possible if a ball joint broke, the car would have squatted down on this control arm, and it is possible that it squished this here circle here. But it's also possible that the entire subframe was replaced, so I can't discount that as well. Safe to say, this car's seen some things. So I've got a new control arm on order from eBay Motors. They're not a sponsor or anything. I just needed to get a part from them. So that's going to arrive, I don't know, probably in a few days. I'm going to go ahead and put together the driver's side and just really put together what I can on this side. So I'm going to drop that shock, put together the lower control arm so that all I really have to do is put the upper one in and connect the ball joint once it arrives. Well, I've gotten about as far as I can get with this in its current state. I got the driver's side mostly together. You see I have not reconnected the sway bar, and I do not have, well, I hear shocks and springs are pretty important. I looked at these, and I just kind of really grimaced the thought of putting these back in. Even just to move the car around in the driveway. Now that they're out, I think these need to stay out. So I went ahead and I ordered a full coilover suspension from FLYIN MIATA. And I got, in addition to that, their sway bar package as well. So I'm going to be removing this sway bar and putting in a much nicer suspension here. This car will actually be usable when I'm done with it this time around. So I have to wait for that to arrive. It hopefully will be within the next couple of days, but this side is mostly back together. I need the new upper control arm that I'm waiting for. It should arrive in a couple of days. I hope so. So in the meantime, I am not sitting still. I do have some other things going on. Let's go take a look. So I started another brick pathway project. You can see I've really only gotten started here. I'm kind of annoyed at these bricks that are kind of falling over. I'm hoping that once I get that one last brick, I can kind of hammer it in and they'll kick over just as far as I need. But I might have to dig all of those rocks back in order to accomplish that. I really wanted to get these lined up in order to secure the bricks behind them without having to pour concrete or do anything super permanent, because I don't know if I'm going to connect this to driveway. I don't know if I want to build more bricks. I just don't know yet. So I wanted to get this like really as neat as I can and as tough as I can, and then just build it out from here. So with these bricks, well, those bricks that are way over there, I'm commuting them up here, and then I'm just going to lay sand, even it out as I go, all the way back, and start wrapping around the garage. Once I get around the garage, I do have a few more challenges ahead. Specifically in this area here, the ground is a little uneven, so I'm going to, not exactly sure what I'm going to do about that, but it is not going to be one sandbag at a time. I might have to purchase and have delivered a yard of dirt and have it dumped somewhere so that I can really do this a little more professionally. I'll need to lay down spacers, level them out, dump the dirt, tamp it in. Yeah, this is going to be a much bigger project. But I'm pretty sure I can do it myself. It's just going to take a little bit more thought and effort as opposed to these small pathways that I can kind of just play by ear. Over here, we've got some goodies. You can see here I've got a pair of sway bars and I've got a box of suspension parts. These are the top hats to a NB Miata with everything I need to do a full conversion. And that, along with the sway bars, I think you know where I'm going with this. I bought a Stage 1 coilover suspension kit from FLYIN Miata. Unfortunately, the shocks and springs, you know, kind of the most important part to a suspension, are delayed. They're going to be in tomorrow, which means I have tomorrow to get this car together. There's also one more thing I'm waiting on, and that's over on this side. You see this side is still mostly apart. I did put the lower arm in, but not the upper arm. And why is that? Well, that is because I'm a complete dumbass, and let's walk on over to the upper arm itself. It turns out I'm a complete dumbass, and it's about 500,000 degrees. Getting really tired of this heat. And I was trying to go too fast. I wasn't paying attention to details, and I kind of forgot how to put the ball joint boot on. And as a result, I used the wrong methods to put it on. Spoiler alert, you do not put a ball joint boot on with a hammer. So I tore the boot and I had to order a whole new one. Well, I wanted to order a boot from Moog, but it turns out Moog doesn't sell boots. They sell entire ball joints. So I broke down, I spent the $20 and just bought a whole new ball joint, which will come with a boot, and I can put it on correctly using my big C-clamp and a socket instead of a socket and a rubber hammer. I'm going to take this rubber hammer back outside for my brick project. Well, I got the passenger side back together. Everything's in, torque to spec. I almost ruined another ball joint boot. It's kind of hard to see, but this metal ring that's at the very base of the boot, I had bent it a little bit, but I was able to straighten it out enough, and it seated on there just fine. I'm just going to keep an eye on it. I'll check in on it now and then, but I think it's going to be reliable. I think it's going to be not a problem at all. But it was intense for a minute when I thought I had ruined a second ball joint. I have placed in, not installed, but I have placed in the FLYIN Miata sway bar here, and oh good, it will clear the control arm. And I have to reconnect this AC line. I've got the little rubber down here. I've got to clean it up and re-oil it and put it back on. So I got the sway bar end links over here. Yesterday they were a little bit difficult going in. I was trying to use my crappy little vise to press in the rubbers. So this morning I took it over to my press and it went in just fine. I had no problems this morning. So then I was able to press in the inner sleeve here with my crappy little vise. So this is good. I know these are stock end links, but I don't think I need adjustable end links at this stage in this car's life. I may get adjustable and links once I get wheels and do some other things, you know, ready to lower the car to the ground and maybe track it or something. But I'm not much of a track guy, so I don't know if that day will ever come. Well, 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 look at what we have here. This is the last thing that I'm waiting on to get the front end of this car back together better than ever. Take a look at them in comparison to the old springs. This is just awful. Let's get these put together and on the car. I've got a box of top hats and assembly hardware for the front and rear. This is actually a conversion kit to adapt the NB shocks and coilover system to an NA car. Let's quit screwing around and get this done. This is a thing of beauty. It's all connected back together, torqued down, mostly to spec. One thing I did that was a little bit different from the instructions is since this car is so off the ground and the suspension is, you know, fully down, I went ahead and adjusted the springs up to the point where they seat because I didn't want the springs flopping around because if they flop around, they fall off of the perch, and when I go to put the car on the ground, they'll make a lot of noises, bad sounding noises. So I did it that way, and once I put the car on the ground, then I will do a better height adjustment. But other than that, wow, this is a great suspension. It looks great under here. I'm really happy with what I was able to do myself, especially. I know the alignment's going to be terrible. I didn't even try to set it. I'm just going to drive it straight to the alignment shop once it's on the ground. Once I can drive it legally, I have set that process in motion. All I have to do is get a new sticker once I get insurance put on the car. Well, I mean, if I were a stance bro, this would be perfect. But I'm not a stance bro. Not at all. I need this to be a little higher than it is. By a bit. This is just entirely too low for living in the hills where I live with rocky, steep driveways. I bottomed out, like high centered the car just trying to turn it around in my driveway out here. So yeah, I really need to raise this front end up a little bit. I don't know how many more threads I can get out of this, but it's got to come up an inch. I mean, it needs to be like where my Prelude's at. My Prelude actually can come down just ever so slightly on the front and up ever so slightly in the rear, but it needs to be something like that, just because this is just not enough. Anyway, let's get the rear up. We want to get the full suspension done before I start mucking around with ride heights and all of that crap. Let's just get this car functionally good before I start doing that. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this video. We're going to get to the rear end next week because there's some things going on. If you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, comment. If you don't like what you see, maybe you think there's just too many Miata videos on YouTube, you'd probably be right, but leave a comment anyway, because it'll really help out the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.